Charles, we're trying something complicated and new today.
Good, good.
I hope it'll work.
It'll certainly work better than the Iowa caucus.
It might work just as well as the Iowa caucus. We are, if this is correct, we're, in addition to our normal video broadcast, we are podcasting today.
What does that mean?
Well, like iTunes audio-only podcast.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Wow.
I hope so.
That's new ground.
Yeah, it's something a lot of people have asked for a long time, and I've been trying to set up. And the thing that's kind of complicated is that, there's so many different channels that Crowdsource the Truth is on, between YouTube and Periscope and Facebook and DLive and VK.com and Twitch, and of course, Subscribestar and Patreon. And so anything that involves, downloading the material and extracting the audio and re-uploading it, it's so complicated to do, and so many mistakes that can happen, and so many different shows that I'm doing throughout the week. I needed to come up with a somewhat automated process that's hopefully happening over there. I won't know until the end of the show if it's working or not, but if it is working, people will be able to listen to Crowdsource the Truth in their car, at the gym, on the subway, with an iPod, iPhone, whatever, however they get podcasts. But this is a tentative sort of beta test.
Well done, Jason. You're becoming a multimedia mogul.
Let's see if it works first.
All right, let's do that.
But Charles, welcome to Sunday. We'll be
doing that too.
Yeah, we'll be exploring some true bull today.
Yeah, I think sometimes these movie posters just come right to life. At least the idea for them comes right to life. But when you have the President of the United States get up in the East Room and say what we've been saying on this show, actually, if you go back and look, I think we've called this bullshit for years, actually, going all the way back to the very inception of it. Because we started on this together about a month after Mueller,
started the investigation.
Well, tried to pretend that he was investigating, because evidently there's news just out that he hasn't submitted any reports to Congress.
What?
I just saw that.
What was that whole Mueller report that they put on
other
him?
than that, no additional reports have been.
What about the bar bill? He could send them that.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty big.
Holy crap. You know what? I don't know, Charles. There was a guy one time who worked for Crowdsource, or 21st Century 3D. I had a Halloween party at my house, and I found out the guy was a heroin addict.
That's not good.
Yeah, it was the end of his employment.
That's right.
But, that's like, sometimes that happens, that you discover this guy's been, it's like, what was that report that George was always working on, that he had the file?
I forget.
They kept coming to his office and he was working on the file.
Oh, you mean, Seinfeld. I think you're talking about a different George. Yeah. That was hysterical.
But then they discovered he had done nothing.
Exactly.
The whole time he was there. That's like Robert Mueller. We got to figure out the name of that file. Someone in the chat will know the name of the file.
Yeah.
They also screwed up the industrial smoothing job. They botched the Statue of Liberty renovation, as I recall.
Yeah. Anyway, so the art department has once again outdone itself, and I don't know how closely people can see the images on the screen here, but you look at this, Bill Clinton's dejected look, and Hillary's got that. I just smashed your glass collection again for the 450,000th time. That's a face that not even...
The Pinsky file, that was the file.
Was it the Pinsky?
Thank you,
that Pinsky file. Yeah, but you look at her face, and that is, that's actually her when she's trying to romance you. That's not even her nasty face.
Yeah.
But that's well done. And Bill, I don't know how you got that. That's probably him thinking, oh my God, I'm down this path. I've been married to her for 50 years.
It took me a little while to hone the Bill Clinton mullet.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
And then of course, we have the scavenger from California, Mr. Schiff, who honestly, if Schiff were a Republican, he'd be in prison. Right? He would have been in prison long, long ago. Same deal with Brennan. These two people their record is beyond disgusting. And we're in a moment, I think, as we've been saying before, that President Trump does not have the option of going lenient on these two people and the others involved in the conspiracy to attempt to invalidate the 2016 election, starting with Hillary Clinton's rigging of the Democrat primaries and then continuing to the general election and afterwards. So Donald Trump doesn't have the option of just saying, oh, okay, never mind, I'm acquitted, I'll just move along here. He's got to do something about these people. And certainly, I mean, the notion that Brennan would still maybe have his security clearance I don't get that. I mean, I just don't get it.
I thought they pulled it a long time ago.
Yeah, but there have been stories circulating that he may still have it. And I think that's crap. I think you should be forced. I mean, you don't get to, for example, with your driver's license, after it's expired, you don't get to say, well, I might need to drive again. I automatically... No, you've got to go in and take the test. And similarly, this moron who, almost destroyed the entire world, this Brennan guy, should not be allowed to remain, with access to top secret information.
I agree. Speaking of driver's licenses and other things, Charles, should I mention this? This is, I don't know, some people maybe don't like this global entry, but this is real convenient when you come back maybe from Norway and there's a huge line of people. Right. You just go right through the machine.
Well, actually, on that note as well, I didn't put it in here because I don't think it's fair to pick on the bug-eyed bartender too much. But she was quoted apparently in somewhere today saying, people give me a hard time about being a bartender. There are plenty of people in Congress who are not as smart as a bartender. Like, oh. And you were supposed to be cool. I mean, that was true and not helpful when she said it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how smart is a bartender. I'm sure there's some who are geniuses.
Actually, you go to some of those old-fashioned watering holes like 21 Club or whatever, there are bartenders who are amazing. They have these gifts of they remember your face, they remember
what you
drink, they remember who your friends are, they remember who your enemies are, and some of these people are extremely gifted. Right. AOC would not be one of them.
No.
No.
I think she's from the school of bartending where they spell your name wrong on the coffee cup.
Exactly.
Or they write coffee for the pigs when the police order coffee.
Exactly.
That's happening all the time now. A lot of people putting in stupid messages on the coffee. So, Charles, we have a lot to cover today, and we have a special guest joining us.
Right. So why don't we rip through this? Good point, Jason.
Curtail my flibber flabber.
That's all right. No. Welcome to the people, the returning guests and new guests. As you know, our approach here is a different approach. We're not trying to just use the internets to do what old media was doing. We're trying to engage with a wide audience around the world of people who are interested in actually rising up and doing something positive.
We utilize it as a series of tubes.
Exactly. That too, those vacuum tubes are everywhere. So what we do here is to do that, we, unlike your Sunday show, typical Sunday show or a news show or whatever, where you'll have a panel that might have 6 minutes on it, nestled between MyPillow and other advertisements for drugs that'll kill you if you don't use them carefully.
Sometimes just vomiting and sexual side effects, which might be okay.
Exactly. What we do is we try to do deep dives, both into what's going on currently, what we think might happen in the coming week, but then deep dives into what we have argued are the largest set of unprosecuted frauds, not just charity frauds in the history of the planet. And they're so big that this is, I guess, our 207th show. On average, they're about 2 hours long, each one of which tends to have, or the overwhelming majority tend to have these slide presentations. We marry up Jason's experience in Hollywood and in media with mine advising boards and investors on complex transactions, and we give you a video presentation, now an audio presentation you can listen to, and a textual presentation that you can either pull down and print or use electronically. And if you use it electronically, there are links to vast amounts of information supporting evidence that you can, again, pull down, print, or not as you wish, just to satisfy yourself that there's some real meat on this bone.
Yeah.
The opinions that are expressed here by Jason and me are opinions, are informed opinions. We're entitled to them in the United States of America, at least last time
for the time being. Yeah.
For the time being. Maybe not in Sweden, where our poor friend Biljana is under assault. And we're going to have to circle back with her, I think. We missed her on the trip we were very close to her, actually, when we were there in Oslo. I mean, in Russia, wherever we were.
Oh, you're so in confusion with that, Charles.
Me?
Yes. Are people noticing better playback quality today? Because in addition to the 1080p full HD and the 24-bit audio, we now have more light in this room, which will hopefully improve image quality.
Very well done, and thanks for that Kaizen improvement.
Exactly.
So if people want to reach us, Jason or me, with constructive suggestions, keep them brief. On Twitter, obviously you're limited to the number of characters, but on email, if you send one to me via my site, try to keep them short, because I just don't have the ability for somebody I don't know to start reading 25 pages about a topic that may or may not be clear. So, but please do feel free. Jason and I really appreciate our contacts with all of you. Here's the playlist. Jason, maybe you could summarize it. It gets better and better.
Yeah. I think today is 207, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we've had over 35,000 views of this playlist. And as Charles was mentioning, if you click on any of the videos, you may have to just go down below the video here to the description section where it often says show more. And you just tap that, you're going to get access to all of the sponsorship links, and you can support the show. You can click on the download Charles's presentation link, and that's going to bring you to the PDF for that week, which you can either follow on screen or use this standard download icon to download it to your computer, print it out, print it giant size, make a billboard, post it all over town. There's a variety of things that people could choose to do if they get creative with that.
You could send it to Nancy Pelosi, but
I should just rip it up.
Well, no. First, you put in one of those plastic. What are those things called, where you laminate them?
Yes.
So you can laminate it and send it to Nancy Pelosi at the Speaker's office.
Frustrate her tearing.
Yeah. But actually, today we have, and we'll rush through this because at 3:30 we have got the great Ted Malloch dialing in from Europe.
No. England. No longer part of Europe.
That's true. He has Brexited Europe. So he will be calling in at around 3:30. So I'll try to get through this quickly. This, in a shameless self-promotion, the first link, I don't know if people know much about Lucienne.com, but Lucienne.com has been around for a long time. This is Jonah Goldberg's mother of National Review fame, now the Dispatch. And what she does, she's been clipping for a long time, and it's sort of a mini Drudge Report, which I think may have started before the Drudge Report. But what she does is she selects things she likes, and she gives a brief summary, and then she puts a link to the original article. So Jason, if you could hit that. This is the site run by Thomas Lifson, and I am just honored. This thing already has 112 comments, went out this morning.
Wow.
And it provides a lot of interesting links. People say to us, Jason and me, either privately or sometimes with comments, you guys, you're yakking, 207 videos, nothing's happening, why don't we see any progress? Well, neither Jason nor I are in charge of anything. I mean, you're in charge of Crowdsource the Truth, but I'm in charge of basically sweet fuck all. And, I don't have a staff. I don't have this and that. But what we've been trying to do here is help people wrap their minds around this massive scandal. And some people do more than just wrap their minds around it. This Larry Doyle and Whitey Moynihan, I've gotten to know them since 2016. And they really dug in here, and I don't know precisely what they are doing, but I was made aware of this case that we provide a link to it that's in the U.S. tax court. People can go and look and see what has happened since Messrs. Doyle, non-Messrs, these are straight shooters, Doyle and Moynihan went down to Congress. They sat down with Mark Meadows. Huber was supposed to be there. And he didn't show up, and look at this, from March 2019 forward, there's been a large number of things going on, including, if you go to the next page, yeah, page 2. Yeah. You'll notice that, you'll notice in here, right, 1/9/2020. This is right around the time that, almost this exact day, that the Washington Post article magically appeared, suggesting that Hoover isn't doing anything, and that investigation was all for naught, and that maniac Rachel Maddow immediately picks up on the Washington Post that there's a massive media dumpster fire about, President Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney couldn't find anything with the Clinton Foundation. There's nothing to see here. Don't worry about it. No, just move along. Well, we don't know exactly precisely what's involved here, but there's 2 pages of entries since Doyle and Moynihan were down in front of Mark Meadows when nothing happened. Remember in 2019, of course, that Congress changed control, and we see the benefits of that, in quotes, of Schiff and Nadler, et cetera, have the car keys to the Congress for now with Nancy Pelosi. But there's a lot, it would appear that there's a lot going on here. And I hope that people begin to grasp that what the real issue may well be here, based on what I've seen so far of documents relating to the Clinton Foundation. I've seen obviously a lot of them. The real story is that there are elements within the IRS, within the Department of Justice, that are fundamentally corrupt, and the FBI. They are fundamentally corrupt.
Yeah.
This Clinton Foundation should never have been allowed to operate after Bill Clinton left office. It should, he was president, it's going to operate. But after he left, when dopey James Comey and the drunk Robert Mueller and the crafty Rod Rosenstein were around directly or indirectly, an investigation that happened for 4 years, when there were no audits, no compliant legal filings, when Bill was flying around the world, putting expenses on a foundation that was supposed to only do stuff in Arkansas. For 4 long years, dopey James Comey, who has enough time to write op-ed pieces in the Washington Post now, has collected millions of bucks. Dopey James Comey couldn't see the obvious. Or maybe he reached an accommodation with the powers that be to just, spin his wheels for 4 years and get paid off, as he subsequently did get paid off in these high-paying jobs. So there's a lot here. Lesser charities have been shut down, and I'm not saying that I know precisely what this case is all about, but knowing how much work Moynihan and Doyle have done, that's evident in the testimony before Congress, the sneaking suspicion I have is that this case has to do with calling bullshit on the IRS and saying, you cannot let not just the Clinton Foundation, but multiple other charities like the Barack Obama Foundation and the Bush Foundations and other non-presidential foundations, when grifters see that the IRS is corrupt and nobody's going to do anything about it, they say, whoopee, more grift for us, let's grift.
Yeah.
Let's put on those grifter shoes.
Yeah.
So if we go back in here, quickly on the RT link, this was a funny panel. I've done this a few times, these different panels, but they did quite a professional job. And the back and forth here was strange. This was taped, I think, I believe, Thursday morning last week. I forget when exactly, but it was fun to do, an honor to do, and it was one of these rare panels where the people who were saying that, all the panelists, and it was supposed to be 2 sides, were saying the Democratic Party is basically clusterfucked. And it's just...
So the Democrats that were supposed to disagree with you were...
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can you disagree? It's like...
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is sometimes, you don't want to be in this place, but the bottom line and on the Iowa, as Rush likes to call it, what does he call it? Caucus, not the caucus. But the Iowa caucus was that you look at that and you say, nobody who spoke at that caucus or was running in that caucus is qualified to be president of the onion ring department of Burger King. I mean, it's like,
and no one's even ordering that.
right. I mean, it was just, and that you could get this Perez, you know, right before the head of the Democratic National Committee, or whatever he is, chairman of the party. Before it's revealed that he and his senior people got some gigantic golden parachute contract that if he's fired, they get to take a whole bunch of money. This thing happens, and he adamantly today on the Sunday show said, "I'm not leaving. Why should I resign?" Well, I don't know. You just fucked up the first caucus of the primary season, and even now you still don't know who actually may have won. And you're supposed to be the high-tech Silicon Valley party.
Wow.
I mean, these guys couldn't operate a rotary telephone. I mean, anyway, so
Dr. Corsi reminded us that he used to be part of La Raza, which,
of course,
don't they want to destroy America?
yeah, he's a horrible
he's
human being.
Doing a great job.
Yeah, I guess so. And then I actually, for my sins, you know, I will reveal that Friday night is my night, now that I'm ancient, to go to sleep early. And so the notion of going from 8 till 11 and watching this shit show was not high on my list, but I was so bad that I couldn't help watching till about 10:30 when I'd had enough. But we got to the point, I was willing to give Pete Buttigieg the benefit of the doubt until I saw, I mean, he was pulling, I refer to these in the Clinton Foundation as word torrents. You know, they're not paragraphs, they're just words. They just put them down on paper. It's like sustainable, reliable, just.
Word torrents.
You know, it's just a word torrent. So there was an anchor in that debate. Her name, I think, is Lindsay, Linsey Davis, Davis, who is a firecracker. I mean, she was really good, frankly. She asked tough questions and even tougher follow-ups. But she asked Buttigieg, you know, on the issue of his eggshell white problem, that he doesn't really have much of a following in the African American community. You know, she's something like, do you think one of the reasons that you have a problem with the African American community is that arrests of African Americans in whatever the city he's in there,
Grand Rapids,
South Bend over,
South Bend, South Bend.
Sword. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That's good. We're about to get removed from YouTube.
Sorry. Soared under his mayorship, and you know, he just got up there and he started just throwing a whole bunch of words at her that were not sentences. It was just like, you know, the politics of America and the people are issues that I care about, and you know, on my watch as commander-in-chief, things are going to be sustainable and reliable. You can depend on that. We're going to. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? That's more or less what she said to him. So he is, you know, he is unelectable. I mean, maybe he could come. He could come from here, the place he is, come and do a better job in New York than what's his name,
De Blasio.
DeCrazio. Yeah. But I mean, this guy he actually makes De Blasio look smart.
Well, he's also a Rhodes Scholar.
And a McKinsey consultant.
And a member of Kappa Beta Phi, I think.
No, I think he's a member of
Phi Beta Kappa.
Oh, Phi Beta Kappa. Is he really? He went to Harvard, I think. But
right.
I mean,
so these are all like secret societies for weirdos that they want to make president.
Well, Phi Beta Kappa is supposed to be the top students at their.
No. They put on weird shoes.
That's
and
Skull and Bones you're thinking about.
No, Phi Beta Kappa, you got, what's his name? Wilbur Ross is the grand swipe.
No. That's something else.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Phi Beta, it could be, there is a secret society where people dress up. You're absolutely right. But Phi Beta Kappa is the one I'm thinking of is an academic.
It's the same one, and it's a crooked, screwy, weirdo deal.
No. This is Kappa Beta Phi.
Kappa Beta Phi, sorry.
Phi Beta Kappa is serious. This is crazy.
Both of them are crazy.
No. Phi Beta Kappa is supposed to be the top, I think, 5 or 10% of a graduating class, and you have to have. My father was in the equivalent of it in science, which is Sigma Xi. Same. This is a cult.
Well, Wilbur Ross is the head of it.
Yeah, well, it's silly stuff.
Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Back to this.
Yeah. So, in terms of Bernie, actually, when we get to Buttigieg, if we hit this thing up here, I will admit, and I probably shouldn't, here we have Buttigieg's early baby picture. Bat boy, bat child.
Where the soup came from.
But I don't know if you recognize that. That's drawn from the Weekly World News, which used to be it's worse than the National Enquirer, more outrageous, but pretty funny.
Alien and slammer after a fist fight. Oh, man.
Pretty
well,
funny.
that looks real. That looks
There's
totally
the alien.
real. They got the booking photo.
That's funny. Anyway.
Great.
So as far as Bernie, he's, back in 72, it's easy to say now, communism is academically interesting and stuff like that. But 1972, the United States and Western Europe were actually locked down in a Cold War against the former Soviet Union and communist China. To say then, in 72, that you're proud to be a communist, I mean, that's batshit crazy.
Well, it's straight up like saying you're proud to be in ISIS right now.
Exactly, exactly. So Bernie he struck me as that's one angry guy, on the stage last whatever night it was, Friday night.
I tried watching it, Charles. It's just beyond boring. Like, could not force myself to stay.
And I loved it. He didn't say it then, but I think he's been quoted as saying the Arctic's on fire. And yesterday the temperature in Alaska, northern Alaska, was negative 45 degrees Fahrenheit. But the Arctic's on fire. We got to do something because Bernie says it. And this to me is just, that people around this Democrat Party could continue to allow him even to be in the primaries without actually being a Democrat is beyond me. I mean, it's not like it's say, well, we're doing such a great job in Iowa, and now we've got this Nevada thing coming up. Maybe the same sort of disaster is going to happen, and you're going to let this Bernie guy. He's really, I think, going to destroy what's remains of the Democrat Party. So quickly.
Luckily, there's no corruption in Nevada, so
that's right.
Totally fine.
Exactly.
Should be good.
Yeah. And so apparently now this is hilarious. This Daily Caller piece that Steele is pissed. Christopher Steele is pissed that Trump has denigrated the quality of the Steele dossier. So
Trump has denigrated the quality of the Steele dossier.
I think that's
amazing.
Next one down, yeah. That's pretty funny.
Oh, that looks like he's there outside his office.
That's right. I mean, this is like, school of, he's advised by Michael Avenatti, or he wants to join Avenatti in prison, I guess. I mean, this guy Steele is a disgrace. And we've heard firsthand accounts of the guy's none too swift.
Jeez. Seems to be in part of the family name.
Yeah. So, this is Orbis. He's still at Orbis. You know them well.
I mean, I was just there a few weeks ago.
Are you working for them, Jason? Or are you?
Yeah. They were surprised to see me. Yeah. Dossier was all but debunked. It was never bunked. I don't understand.
So shall we could pause this slide because we won't get through all of it, and maybe go to the Malik page, which is the next page, because he should be calling in any second.
Sure.
And we'll wait for, is he calling us or?
I think I'll call him.
All right, that's a good idea.
Hopefully he's prepared for us here.
Yes.
Let's say he's online.
Good. Oh, I better put in my earphones, otherwise I won't be able to hear him.
Ted, hello, sir.
Hello.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Ted? There we go. You should be able to hear
There's
both
a little
of us.
echo, but yes, I can hear you.
Good.
I think it should be taken care of now.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I can hear you very well. Thanks.
Welcome, Ted.
Well, it's it's later in the evening here. We've been having a hurricane this weekend, a named storm.
Really? Did that hurricane probably originated in the East Room of the White House?
That's what I was thinking. So we're like mind. We need to get a bigger storm, I think, going there. But maybe, well, they call it the Revenge. Maybe the Revenge has started.
Good. Well, thanks for this latest book. It's really a barn burner, and I see you've got all kinds of endorsements in the promotional blurb that I got on the book from a lot of really famous people are all in for your book, deservedly so.
Well, there is an intellectual group that backs Trump, and I think we know most of those people. There's actually a surprising number of political leaders around the world that the preface is written by the former Deputy Prime Minister and Interior Minister of Italy, I would argue soon to be Prime Minister of Italy, and many consider him the Trump of Europe. So yeah, there is a chorus of supporters.
Great. So why don't you take us through your principal takeaway points on this book?
Well, I was thinking about this book over the course of the last year and a half, and of course, there's so much Trump derangement syndrome, and so many people either hate Trump or give him no time of day. I mean, many of us believe that even before he was elected president, well before that, they started to not just oppose him and delegitimize his presidency, but they actually started a nullification process to, quote unquote, take him out, if not physically, to remove him from office, as we saw last week in the throes of that silly impeachment exercise. So, we went through the Russia collusion and moments and 26th Amendment, and, it's basically nonstop in the media, all kinds of hearings, and then finally this Schiff show. So I felt like it was very important to, of course, I'm an insider here, so I'm not arguing this is done totally objectively. It's very important to kind of give Trump a hearing, and I felt like I was capable of explaining him to the world in a way that kind of a ninth grade reader, not a university professor, could understand. And one way to do that is, of course, is to just state very closely, by looking at what he said and what he's done mostly, what his political philosophy is, what his economic model is, what his vision is, if you want to call it that, what is spiritually motivating Trump. And I think that's pretty clear. And then we look at its book's largely about foreign policy. We look at just about every foreign policy that Trump has touched in these last 3 years and has basically disrupted the world order. And then I look at his adversaries to see how they approach and critique him. And we end with then a kind of epilogue about what we think is going to happen in the next short term, which means keeping America great, getting reelected, and the next couple of years in the second term of the Trump presidency.
Well, I don't know how many of our viewers remember, Ted, and I know you might not bring this up, but I'll allow you not to be modest. My memory is that you were one of the first people to enthusiastically endorse Trump, explaining that you had your deep international business background, because the suspicion was that what people were selling is that Donald Trump's just a New York City real estate dude. What does he know about business? And I think your early pieces that appeared in various media were incredibly influential.
Well, yeah, not to blow my horn too much, but there was an article very early on that I wrote in Forbes magazine comparing very favorably candidate Donald Trump and what looked like his economic plan, economic nationalism, if you will, with that of the president at the turn of the last century, one Theodore Roosevelt. And it was a very kind of honest and glowing comparison. And I know for a fact that Trump was quite taken with that. And in many ways, it is an interesting comparison. People would say Trump's an anomaly. There's never been anyone like him. And, not quite the case. There have been a couple of American presidents going back in time. Andrew Jackson, certainly, but maybe even Theodore Roosevelt, who had a lot in common with Donald Trump.
Yeah, Jason's got your piece up here.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Yeah, the internet works very well.
Good. So
Full of ads, though. There we go.
There you go. And there's a family connection between you and Theodore Roosevelt, right?
Well, there is. It's my father's middle name. It's my middle name. I'm a junior. My father's family is a distant relative on his mother's side to Theodore Roosevelt. So, yeah, I used to be embarrassed by it when people would read out your whole name in second grade, but it actually is quite a kind of great mnemonic device. People tend to remember who you are.
Yeah, I'm sure. And well, looking forward here, and I agree, Jason, there's a bit of an echo that I hear anyway. Looking forward, how quickly do you think Trump will now move to change the ability of the National Security Council holdovers and other Obama holdovers to impede the great work that Trump is trying to do, not only making the U.S. work better, but making multilateral organizations and our foreign allies more responsible about the way in which they deploy power and use our money?
Well, it is a good question, and he's had the power to do it, and to some extent he's been slow to do that. Steve Bannon admits in public and certainly in private to people like me that the original sin, if there was one in the early days of the Trump administration, was the fact that they didn't have a long list of people to go into really senior level positions. They didn't have people that they had vetted. They didn't have a lot of Trump people. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party was always trying to dump people on them or to take people off the hill, or in many ways, and this is the most remarkable fact, I think, to actually keep a number of Obama period holdovers in key positions. And one of those places was the National Security Council, which had grown too large to well over 200 people during Obama's second term in office. And surprisingly, Trump didn't, he had his hands full. He was doing other things. He was trying to turn the tables, as it were, and he didn't replace a lot of those people. And I think it's come back to bite him. So obviously we could name names, the whistleblower himself. I've outed that person and written an entire article about him and what his nefarious actions led to. And then this gentleman you have up who disobeys military protocol and wears his military uniform on Capitol Hill, which you're not supposed to do, and gives testimony against the president, and actually thinks himself to be, in some ways, the policy maker instead of the policy execution arm of the government at a fairly mid-level. So both he and his brother were escorted, I understand, out of the old executive office building on Friday. But there are literally tens and dozens of these kinds of people. We don't know all their names. This one, of course, testified. But we really need to have the Trump administration, and particularly going into a second term, take seriously White House personnel, do a house cleaning, pick people that are actually on the team, not never Trumpers. There are actually, surprisingly, a lot of never Trumpers all around this government. And then there are people who don't have the courage to actually put their name on what they're doing and, write books and editorial pieces called anonymous, which is, actually quite treasonous. So we really have to clean that show up and put the right people into those positions who actually know the president, who back the president, who are on that team 100%.
Couldn't agree more. And I hope he's going to move very quickly now in the coming days and weeks to make the kinds of changes in the foreign policy establishment, importantly in the domestic policy establishment as well. I don't understand for the life of me why Christopher Wray is still the head of the FBI. I don't get that.
This was his choice. He put him there, took him through the process. I know that there are certain people who were backing him who are, what could you say, not on the Trump front page or the top of his list. but he took their advice. So yeah, there are some people that I'm afraid. Trump has turned over a lot of people in various positions, particularly cabinet or sub-cabinet level positions. I always get this criticism in Europe that it's it's an administration that is in disarray, or you have any number of books by Bob Woodward and other superficial authors, in my view, who call it an administration that's in turmoil, that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, or that the turnover rate is so fast that it has never been like that in any previous White House. And I explain in this book, actually, knowing Trump a little bit and actually going back into his business experience, where he ran, of course, a very successful large family business in a very tough market, the construction and building and hotel market. He had a style of management there, which, at least in business schools, and I've taught at a couple of business schools, most recently at Oxford, in business school, we call chaos management. So that sounds very bad and very nefarious and maybe very questionable, but it's actually a management style, and some people use it very effectively. What that means is they keep everybody on pins and needles, and they play one opinion off the other, and there's a lot of flexibility and not much order. And just by virtue of having that style of management, you're going to turn a lot of people over. So I don't think Trump is going to change his management style. It looks more likely that he's going to change a lot more people, including maybe even his chief of staff in the next couple of weeks or months. And we'll have the same thing going on, I would argue, even into the 8th year of the Trump second term.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. What do you make, Ted? Of course, you're based in the UK and you travel around the world. Recently, I gather there was a shout fest between Trump and Boris Johnson over the UK's decision, unwisely in my view, to continue to stick with Huawei.
This is the truth, and it was in the newspapers even this weekend. It has to do largely with the decision about 10 days ago by Boris Johnson's cabinet, and I can tell you it was a split decision in the cabinet to bring Huawei, the, I think, very controversial Chinese telecommunications provider, into their 5G network. The Americans have been arguing that because of intellectual property issues and because of potential spying on the part of the Chinese, that we should not have them in any of the Western democracies' 5G programs looking ahead into the next decade. And that has been an argument that Secretary Ross and John Bolton and other people have been making all over the place, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Western Europe. And it looked to me like Boris Johnson was taking that argument very seriously, but the Chinese obviously side pressured him, and he came up with this actually fairly silly decision to let the Chinese Huawei company into the periphery of their network here in the UK, but not into the core of the network. What I don't think he understands is that in a 5G setup, there is no real core and periphery. It's much more seamless than in previous kinds of technological setups and telecommunications. So it is a faulty, problematic decision. And there's already a lot of backlash here. I know that a couple of his cabinet members are actually trying to twist his arm to go back on what he said. And Secretary of State Pompeo was here last week, and it was very noticeable. He spent actually 2.5, 3 days in the UK meeting with his equivalents, and a lot of time in number 10 talking about this very issue.
As well he should. I mean, we have to be careful, I think, in the United States. If we think back to the previous administration, which the mainstream media continues to lionize, I mean, how many foreign leaders were spied upon by the Obama administration, including apparently Angela Merkel's cell phone? So
that was made public.
Yeah, I know. I know. So on the one hand, we have to tread carefully on this issue. On the other hand, I think back to previous periods where either the U.S. didn't trust Britain or vice versa, in sharing intelligence. We've gone through periods where either side doesn't trust the other. And I would be making the point, if I'm Donald Trump, okay, you want Huawei stuff? We just can't include you in the same zone of comfort we'd like you to be.
That's exactly what has happened. So there's something called the Five Eyes, intelligence sharing amongst the Churchillian English-speaking people, Britain being a part of that. And I think Pompeo was here basically to read on the Riot Act and say, you want to go that route, you might get some good and preferential treatment from the Chinese on trade, but it's going to cost you dearly in intelligence sharing and relations with the U.S. Now, Trump has the ultimate hand here if he wants to play it. And I was explaining this to the British papers this weekend. I got quoted, and I don't think they like this, but the fact is I know Trump and people around him are going to come back in a second round and say, we know you want this U.S.-UK free trade agreement as your Brexit is going through and as you're leaving the European Union, and that's very significant in terms of your understanding of a global Britain in the future. The U.S. would be the kind of second most important trading partner, if you will, to the U.K. We might not be able to have that discussion with you if you move ahead with Huawei.
Well, I hope
in other words,
that.
Play hardball. Yeah. And Trump, I think, is particularly good. He is a baseball player. He played baseball in high school. He's actually pretty good. I think he's a hardball player.
Yeah, I'd like him to play that hardball. Another one I'd like him to play is to say, listen, the relations between Tony Blair and Bill Clinton were strong, and it would appear that Tony Blair has copied some of Bill Clinton's foundation gaming. But what we want to understand now that there's a new administration in the UK, is what exactly happened in the period 1993, January 20th, 1993 forward. What exactly happened in the evolution of US-UK relations as we went around trying to work on the transition from the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe and on other projects? What exactly was happening with Mark Rich? What was happening with George Soros? What is happening with these think tanks and advisory consulting operations that seem to operate out of the UK in league with American and other politicians? What's up with all that?
Well, it would be an opportune time to do that and to have a deep dive and a set of hearings and, kind of an honest conversation. There's no one in the world that knows that detail better than you, Charles. So in my argument, he should have a commission of one and put you in charge of it. But
dangerous.
The fact is, and this is actually a nice long section in our book. It's a subject I've always been inclined to study and write about. I have a chapter on the U.S.-UK special relationship. And of course, it wasn't always that special. We did have an initial revolution and divorce from
Details,
Great Britain. But there have been hot and cool and warm and very sunny times. And my favorite of all is the Ronald Reagan-Margaret Thatcher relationship. Trump reached out in the early days, actually the first days of his administration, to then Prime Minister Theresa May, and actually called her My Maggie. Which turned out to be, of course, quite a farce. She wasn't anything approximating that. But he does seem to like Boris a lot. Boris did ram Brexit through, and there are some, not all, but some similarities in style and temperament and personality between the colorful Boris and the colorful Donald. So I think that they could have, a really solid relationship. It is suggested, he hasn't visited the White House yet, that Boris will be on his way sometime probably before February ends for a very important rendezvous in the White House and the Oval Office. And some of those things you mentioned, the Huawei deal, the trade relationship, this is all, it's important stuff to the U.S. We have a big plate, but it is absolutely critical stuff to the United Kingdom as it tries to make its way in a very competitive world post-Brexit.
Are you sure Donald didn't refer to Theresa May as my magpie? That's
well,
more
she
likely.
turned out to be a lot less. Now, she goes to church down the street from where I live, so I want to be kind to her. And she is a parson's daughter, and she was, a backbencher and then a frontbencher and the home secretary for 5 or 6 years. So she has a long political career. I just don't think personally she was up to being prime minister.
I agree. Now, another question for you. I know that we're going to spend, after we let you go, we're going to spend a good amount of time looking at the maladministration of DFID, Department for International Development, UK government funding towards the Clinton Foundation. But I have read in recent weeks that Boris Johnson has stepped up his calls for reforming the ways in which the UK disperses tremendous amounts of money around the world and accepts for that money a whole bunch of glossy reports that never explain, it seems, what actually happened to all that money. Are you hopeful that Boris Johnson will actually shake up DFID?
I think there is a reason for hope there. I'm told that DFID is going to be brought under the wing more closely of the Foreign Office, so there'll be a lot more, they use the word here, scrutiny. They really need to. They have made this, I think, illegitimate. This is so dated. This illegitimate promise to spend, 0.7% of their GDP on foreign aid, but it's like rich philanthropists with too much money giving it away. They don't oftentimes look at or take seriously what they're giving it to, who they're giving it to, and how it's actually being deployed. So in my view, a lot of this money is actually, ill given, and it does a lot more harm than good. It'd be better if we gave less, or certainly that we took it a lot more seriously and actually scrutinized who got it. That goes for the United States, but it's even more critical in the UK, where they have this mentality. It's a little bit less charitable than the US, that the government has to give this large slice of pie to, quote, needy things and people around the world.
Yeah, it's really something. One of the things we've been doing, Ted, in the intervening weeks and months since you were last on, is we've been going sort of donor country by donor country and looking at recipient countries. And one of the common themes we've found is, take a country like Norway that's been so generous, or the UK or France, you could probably fill a new library full of all the consulting reports that come back and what a great job they've done with all that money. But then you look at the CIA World Factbook country by country, and they have this section for each country, number of people living in the country without any form of electricity. And we covered Ethiopia a little bit a while ago. It's over 100 million people. 70 million people in Ethiopia don't have electricity. A country that is hot, would probably benefit from actually having electricity in many different ways. Kind of useful to operate, let's say, a hospital with electricity. How come these boffins in the UK, at Oxford and elsewhere, you're so familiar with them, how come they can't reduce this idea of development down to key metrics, like clean water, clean sanitation, actual electricity, roads, paved roads? I mean, there's simple metrics you could check.
Yeah, well, there are any number of measures. You'd think that you could agree on a few core things. I think the United Nations, with which I'm very familiar, has I think 17 multilateral development goals or whatever surrounding their sustainability indexes and such. I mean, there's just too much going on here. It would be much better if we basically gave that money directly to the parties that could actually put it to use, rather than filtering it through governments, which tend to be, and particularly here we're talking about kleptocracies and corrupt third world regimes, or maybe Ukrainian regimes. That's a whole different subject. It ends up in Swiss bank accounts, or making new palaces for the president, or endowing national airlines that nobody rides. It would be much better if it could be given directly. I mean, I am very much, as you know, in favor of charity, but charity should be given responsibly, and I don't think the governments are the best interlocutors in that charity game.
Absolutely not. So we've only got about 5 more minutes with you, Ted. I know your schedule is very busy. Jason, maybe we should put that book, Amazon book thing up. How are sales going? How can people...
Well, the book has been out, I think, for about 2 weeks. We have a couple of events over here, one in Parliament and one at the Institute of Economic Affairs in London, where I'll be, presenting the thesis and interacting with journalists and others.
Good.
I mean, there's a lot of Trump hate and Trump haters everywhere. So, I could go on and take my beating and try to defend what he's doing, how he's doing it. A book like this, at least, I think, begins to articulate what is behind, again, the philosophy, what is behind the kind of patriotism, sovereignty, and how he is an anti-globalist. Now, that does not sit well with lots of people who love globalism, think that foreign policy should be made on a multilateral basis, or are in love with the European Union. But then that's not me, and that's not Trump.
It's not me. I mean, in a piece that's out today in the American Thinker, I'm trying to describe globalism as feudalism, not feudal with a D, but F-U-T. I mean, when you look at the hard facts that are out there, as you have done so effectively, Ted, globalism is great for the cronies, but it's not so good for the people who want to work for a living.
Indeed, which is why we have this enormous backlash. I would say that, the whole pendulum of history is moving against globalism, against the party of Davos, against those entrenched bureaucracies, against the deep state. I mean, there are any number of things. It's why the EU is in the state it's in. It's why Trump got elected, is going to get reelected. It's why the Democratic debate it's so funny, it's sad. I wrote a piece today, it appeared in American Greatness, on the American oligarch, Mini Mike. He believes he can just spend $2 billion and buy an election.
Yeah, that's really pathetic, frankly.
Now, Ted, before you leave, I just wanted to ask if you could comment a bit. You narrowly avoided becoming a major factor in the impeachment. We heard from Dr. Corsi how the FBI was... Well, they were so interested in this FaceTime phone call that you and Dr. Corsi had. You're in England, of course, and so a normal, traditional long-distance phone call, who wants to pay those rates now when you have so many options for alternative technologies that are free? Any comment about the FaceTime call?
Oh, well, I thought you were going to ask me the more serious question about how close I came to being the U.S. ambassador to the EU until the European Union, and I'm very proud of this, I can show you the letter, made me persona non grata. So I'm the only American in history to have been basically discarded by the European Union. I wear it as a badge of courage. On the other question, it is, I was involved in the Trump campaign. I did a lot of writing. I know Steve and Steve Miller, other people, and I gave a lot of analysis. I worked with Sam Clovis on some policy stuff. But at a certain point in time, a guy named Roger Stone, through Jerry Corsi, forwarded me an email, and that caused a lot of ire in the Mueller investigation, and it cost me a lot of money in terms of lawyers. I had to go and give testimony before a grand jury, but there ain't no there, so it didn't really amount to much. I guess Mr. Stone, who I have had dinner with all of once, and of course has an illustrious political career himself, is going to be sentenced at about 10 days from now.
Yeah.
That's a chapter that should never have been written in the first place. It's really regrettable, and I hope the president does the right thing here.
Yeah. And here's the article.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother set of things, people he can pardon or forgive or, set free. I mean, the whole witch hunt, hoax, whatever you want to call it, the president has many terms for it, has, ensnared lots of people and made lots of noise. But again, there was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And in my view, this president is the most transformative president probably since Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree with you, Ted, on one small point, and I think you'll end up maybe agreeing with me. There was absolutely collusion. There was absolutely conspiracy. It was between the Barack Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Well, there you go. And of course, I wrote a whole book on that called
Right.
The Plot to Destroy the President. Well before anyone else, I exposed the Christopher Steele dossier for what it was.
Well, geez, thank you, Ted, for everything that you do. What's next for Ted Malloch?
Well, I see that Gordon Sondland has been, what could you say,
Cashier.
summarily fired. So maybe they'll call me back to be made persona non grata for a second time. But no, I look forward to writing, over the course of this campaign, and I do a lot of speaking. I'm in different European capitals, fairly constantly, and I still do some academic things. So I'm involved in executive education and things that actually put bread on your table.
Very good, Ted. Well, thanks for sharing your time with us on a Sunday evening. We really appreciate it, Jason and I. All the best.
Okay, keep it up. Good night.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks, Ted. There you go, Charles. Ted Malloch. The
Great. He's a fine
Ted
man.
Malloch.
I'll take these out, actually.
Yeah.
That might have been the echo. Yeah, that was the echo, I think. The headphones. Anyway.
Tell me about it.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So if we could just go back into the slide that we were halfway through, and I'll rush through it. It's a previous page. Yeah. So we had talked, we were on this Daily Caller thing. This is actually just a sidebar here, the next one down. It's pretty interesting. It's gotten picked up in Rantingly and elsewhere. Have you seen this thing about the radio bursts?
Daily Mail, you mean? Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Radio bursts. No.
Radio signals. This is.
I thought you need to drop the radio in the bathtub to make it burst.
No, this is apparently it's quite interesting that every 16 days there's a cycle that's coming from 500 million light years away, and I only bring this up just for I assume we might be about here when we were done with Ted, is just to have a little humorous transition to say, when you think of this and you say, all right, let's say there is an alien civilization out there, right? And
they're
let's
running
say,
the Democratic Party.
Well, let's say that they're going to land here, right? And I use this old "take me to your leader" kind of thing in my mind, thinking about the Democratic Party in the caucus. I mean, do we really think that any one of the people, that the aliens would believe that any one of the people in the Democratic primary actually could be the leader of the free world? I think the aliens would say, we're out of here.
Joe Biden would sniff them.
Exactly.
And then he'd be like, listen, fat.
Hey, listen, fat. Or what did he call that person? That
pony.
Dog-faced
soldier.
Pony or something? Or whatever.
Dog-faced pony soldier. It's a very weird insult, Charles. I don't know where he got that from.
He did not go to the Dare to Be Great school, Dale Carnegie. So this is a very long article, which I commend for people's to read in some depth. There is a story going to come out of the Ukraine. We have only gotten, I think, the edges of the story. We have to go and explore to understand it better. We've got to explore what it is that Bill Clinton and prior to him, George H.W. Bush were trying to do, inveigling against the final days of the Soviet Union. Then as it broke up, as Eastern Europe switched, what was American policy all about? What were we allowing people like George Soros and Mark Rich and others to do, meddling in these various countries as they privatized, meaning as assets of these countries were typically purchased at fire sale prices by people close to Western politicians. How did that all move forward into the period under Obama? When you recall, in 2008, before the Olympics, the Chinese Olympics, there was a matter in Georgia, the country of Georgia, where Russia basically crushed dissent in Georgia. And people were saying, well, wait a minute, that's not right. And next thing you know, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton decide to push the overcharge or reset button and overlook what was going on in Georgia.
The overlook button.
The overlook button, exactly. And so just to understand, you can't understand what was going on, I think, what is going on in Ukraine and what was going on at Maidan Square without seeing it in the longer context of relations. And we're just not getting that view, in part because the international relations faculties at the great universities I think are all part of this corruption. They're all part of legitimizing, globalism, legitimizing these crazy views that allow you to then place gigantic taxes on people around the world and send portions of those taxes into slush buckets that the very academics and politicians and cronies all split up. So there's a long piece here. We won't get into it now, but I just urge people to read up on the Ukraine and expect a lot from Rudy Giuliani and John Solomon, I think, in coming days, frankly. Now, this is an interesting thing. We'll go quickly through this. This is
exactly what I was going to ask you about in light of speaking about Fox News and John Solomon, because this is coming from one of our favorite sources of fake news, supporting somebody else's fake news about people who might be bringing us some actual news.
Right. So basically, when out of the blue, you'll recall, right before my birthday, the supplier of Coca-Cola to Bill Clinton, the press flack, Angel Urena, and I'm sure he does very important work for him, tweeted out, targeting me before my birthday, in some ways, you could argue threatening me, referring to me, putting my name as one version, and then in the past tense, 2 days before my birthday, saying that all I do is spread lies about the Clinton Foundation, appear on Russian media, and I'm a friend of John Solomon. And when I saw that, I'd never heard of this Angel Urena, other than he was the guy who put a tweet out after the Epstein matter was going front and center, saying Bill actually only went on 4 visits.
But you didn't see his banana commercials? He's
I haven't.
Very prominent.
Is he? Oh God, I knew I'd seen him somewhere else.
Yeah.
Chiquita Bananas. Okay. Anyway,
laser.
And who is that? What brand is that? That's the Hillary Clinton brand, or?
I don't know.
Anyway,
we cheat you, banana.
Right.
Company.
So when we go into this a little bit, it turns out that what happened towards the end of 2019 is that somebody inside Fox did this memo trashing John Solomon, trashing Hannity, that of course gets leaked to the Daily Beast. And they're trying to characterize this as saying that Fox has real problems with the narratives that Hannity has been citing so effectively, with support from John Solomon and Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tensing. So I think there was, a major league attack program that was planned in advance. This was leaked out. It all came together. You'll notice Joe DeGeneva has not been as frequently on Fox. John Solomon's been distracted with the break-in into his car, where they supposedly took a laptop out of his car. But it certainly seems to me as part of a coordinated attack against anybody who may be over the target of what is really going on here. And I would just remind people, we've brought this up in the past. There's a gentleman named James Kennedy, who is a senior executive inside, I forget whether it's News or Fox, but he's a senior communications executive. And he's a gentleman who has a lot to answer for. I hope our FBI goes to see him as this Durham investigation matures. Jim Kennedy was a Hillary Clinton operative in her political campaigns, and then I think in the Senate, who went from there eventually into the Clinton Foundation in New York in 2003. We've got his name on emails to the Irish government back and forth, illegally soliciting money, which was raised from the Irish government starting in 2003 through about 2008, when he was in the Clinton Foundation, when it had no business doing anything outside of Little Rock. And he was collected.
Is that bad?
That's not good. Not good. And so, I think what we're seeing here, but if we go back to that January 9th timeframe, that was a timeframe when, people were getting back from their various vacations, looking ahead towards the impeachment trial, probably thinking that, maybe they could snare more than just Romney, and that there was a fighting chance that maybe he would be removed. And so they were revving things up to try to, anoint Hillary Clinton, which is not a phrase I would like to use again, ever. But I think these moves that are being taken by Fox remind me of the idiotic decision to create New Coca-Cola. I mean, Fox News, say what you want about it. You do have the option. You don't have to keep the television on the channel that it's on. You can switch it if you don't like it. So Fox was, I think, built a gigantic brand presence, being the antidote to the fake news mainstream media that is now infected across the planet. And to try to say, well, I want to be more like the mainstream, I want to have more people that I might see on MSNBC and CNN on a Fox program, that's insanity. And it's the kind of decision you make if you're a spoiled brat son of a billionaire who's never had to work in your life.
What did you tell us, Charles, about family businesses, how the second doesn't get past the
It's
third
very
generation?
difficult. It's very, very difficult. I come out of a family that's been in family businesses for decades, and has been out now for decades of one of them. But when I was at Dillon Read as a merger and acquisition guy, one of the specialties we had was working with families to try to make sure that their business would either survive and prosper, or alternatively to sell the sucker, because the next generation was hopeless, and that is a problem. And just because your father is good or mother is good at something does not necessarily mean that you will be good at it. And inside a family business, the second you shouldn't be running a public company as a family business, because there are many, many important third-party shareholders. But I would argue that Fox is on a path to disaster here if this is really what happened. At a time, when we're not questioning enough how powerful Facebook and Google and Twitter are. I mean, want to talk about influencing elections? Let's go back into 2016. There's that psychiatrist whose wife died. Epstein is his name, no relation, I don't believe, who alleges that 3 million votes were shifted to Hillary Clinton.
And then his wife gets in a car accident.
Yeah. But I see it just in the way I can barely turn on my computer, but I see in the way in which my Google search results appear to be muzzled. I mean, we've now done over 400 hours of programming just with you, and beyond that, I'm not bragging, but I've done a lot of other stuff. Why should my Google search results be falling? Doesn't make sense. They should be rising because there's more of this stuff. So. Yeah. With the decline and imminent fall of the mainstream media, you're left to social media, where editorial decisions in theory aren't made, but in practice are made by people who are chiefly uneducated. Anybody who's graduated from university, I would argue after 1988 or 89, is very, very, your education is suspect, because the Clintonites, these pro-globalist people, have been awarding the A's out to people who will not shave if they're men and wear the stupid hats.
What if you got a B?
If you got a B,
I'm good.
Yeah, B's good, actually. You're just going to worry about the people who got the fake A's. So there's a job to do here, and Donald Trump, didn't listen, I think, carefully enough in the 2018 period when he held all his rallies and thought he would hold the House, and he didn't. If he loses in November, which I think is unlikely at this point, things would get very bad very quickly. And in order to make sure that there's fairness, I do think there should be more than just talks about the ways in which, what's his name, O'Keefe gets bummed out of Twitter, but Snoop Dogg, who's amusing and basically a comic, can talk about going after, sending people to go get Gayle King.
Did he say that?
Yeah, and that there can't be that double standard that you're going to take down conservatives from the social media because they might in the future do something, but here's somebody actually threatening the life of somebody, encouraging gangsters.
Well, and also he was a gangster. He was killing people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's a double standard.
I don't think James O'Keefe has ever actually done a drive-by.
No, he's an anti-gay.
He's a nice guy.
Very nice guy.
Yeah.
Now, then here, this is an excellent piece. I love this conservative treehouse Sundance. This is too long to go over now, but very important for the crowd to read this in great depth. And the nub of the story here is that there is a theory that the UK was very much involved supporting the Hillary Clinton candidacy, and that these ties run deep. That we played, I think, dirty with the UK going over for too many presidencies, I believe. It's an acknowledged fact that H.W. Bush could not believe a draft dodger in Bill Clinton would actually have a fighting chance in 1992, so reached out, maybe through surrogates or whatever, to get the British government's help in the 1992 election. this idea of people doing that in both parties, it's not a novel idea. But with regard to 2016, it's not a good idea either. But with regard to 2016, I think that Brits were all in for a Hillary Clinton presidency. And we need to understand that. I mean, we really need to understand how many laws were broken here, who were the chief culprits, how deep is the rot. I mean, you can't go, the few times I've been involved with a real estate project, I mean, you got to be honest when you look at a house. If all you want to do is just paint the walls, that's not the best idea if the foundation's rotten. And similarly here, you can't just say, well, we're going to get through this mess by...
We've got a rotten foundation, Charles.
What do you know? Why did I think of that?
Well, what happened to the MI6 guy who resigned the day Trump
Was
won?
it Dearlove or was it another one?
It was somebody else.
Yeah.
Dearlove was, maybe it was GCHQ guy who resigned.
Yeah, exactly. Almost imminently. Was it right after the Rogers meeting or right after the election?
I think it was when Trump won.
Right.
People in the comments will know who I'm talking about.
So the final link on this page is important, is among the more important ones. Boris Johnson ran on a platform of really shaking up the way in which foreign aid is dispensed. Now here you're only talking about, call it $20 billion a year, which is a lot of money. In the US case, it's more than that.
Yeah.
And then you add it all up, the Norways, the big givers per capita, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year in government-to-government aid. And it'd be useful, a government is not supposed to give money other than to a government. You're not setting the United States USAID up so that USAID can just, Tony Blair doesn't have, let's just say he doesn't have a 40,000 acre estate outside London, so why don't we just, because he was good to the United States, let's just have the American taxpayer give him that through a leaky foundation. That's not supposed to happen. But I think when we go through some of the details we're about to go through, you will begin to see just how leaky the buckets are into which foreign aid money goes. And one of the leakiest buckets or leakiest transmission mechanisms...
Robert Hannigan.
Hannigan, that's right. Yeah, he was a bad dude.
Thank you, Steph.
Well done. One of the leakiest transmission systems for foreign aid is via this thing called Department for International Development, DFID, out of the UK. So why don't we go into, the next page is Malik, the page after. Okay, I like to call what these people are doing, they're merchants of misery. They've figured out, and Bill Gates should be ashamed of him for saying that, as he did, that one of his goals is to eliminate poverty. And that's never going to happen.
Well,
so it's a noble thought.
All the poor people.
Huh?
It's going to kill all the poor people.
Well, that would be one way to do it. Yeah, ship them. But anyway, we have this business model where the first step is you assert that there's a gigantic problem that only you and a noble group of people can solve. It was HIV/AIDS, and I'm not saying HIV/AIDS is a small problem, but the dimensions of the HIV/AIDS crisis have never really been checked. It has been asserted that it's a gigantic amount of money was needed. We've never had an honest accounting for that. Then comes the bug-eyed bartender saying, now, climate change, we've only got 10 years left, I guess, at this point, or 11, and that needs $93 trillion, an absurd amount of money, bigger than global GDP for one whole year. I mean, you get these people who will come up with, maybe we'll have somebody say, the aliens are coming and we need to have an alien repulsion initiative. We need to build a wall, out there by Jupiter so no alien spacecraft can get to us. And that's $2 quadrillion or whatever.
Space Force wall.
Exactly.
Charles.
So then what you do, we'll start on HIV/AIDS. What you do is you assert this as a gigantic problem. Now, of course, at the time in 2000, Bill Clinton's administration at the peak gave the HIV/AIDS crisis very little funding. We were, among the more generous countries in the world on it. So then what you do once you assert as an idiot that there's all kinds of problems that need to be solved, you got to get some gullible academics together to sign a piece of paper that says there's a real crisis. So if you hit the first link there under 2, this is the so-called the consensus statement on HIV/AIDS, saying that this antiretroviral treatment would work. And you notice it's interesting, it says it was signed by individual members of the faculty of Harvard University, not by Harvard. This is not a Harvard University position. And we've had this up on the board before. Scientists and experts, medical doctors can take a look at it. The rigor that might be present in an argument in favor of this is missing. You know, there is the support, the mathematical model supporting that this makes any kind of sense is just deeply flawed. Okay, it understates the amount of the size of the trust fund that would be required, and the basic, simple mathematical errors. But this was rushed out in this anti-Bush hysterical period in the spring, April of 2001, when much like the Trump derangement syndrome, you had Bush derangement syndrome. You had a fear that the U.S. would retreat from the world stage. So let's promote this globalist scheme here, which they did. And as I say, the math, the basic idea, if I could sum it up, is that the cost of annually treating an AIDS patient, which is different than an HIV person, but somebody who has full-blown AIDS, was so expensive that Africa was doomed and much of Asia was doomed because there was no realistic prospect, if this spread, that the poorest people in those countries would ever be able to afford the medicine. And the dynamic aspects of this were not really thought through, that yes, it is true that these antiretroviral medicines do delay the evolution of HIV-infected people into having full-blown AIDS. Yes, that is true. And today it's true that if you are diagnosed as HIV positive, you can actually die from other causes, living a long life, because there's been so much progress made in it. But the math it wasn't stress tested carefully enough. This was an argument that you should lower the cost of treatment, but it was not a full argument as to how much money you'd really need for all these people who are going to live longer. And Magic Johnson's a case in point. As somebody who was diagnosed, I think, in 91 or 92, he's very much
pretty healthy.
Oh, yeah, very much alive and thriving, frankly. So the rigor behind that consensus statement was lacking, but nonetheless, it got endorsed, and all sorts of over $100 billion in just close to $100 billion just in the Global Fund was spent on this, of which 75 to 85% of it's missing. So when you have this genius idea, you have to come up with a slogan. And so the slogan is, we need something called the Global Fund. You get McKinsey. Buttigieg was probably still in nursery school then, but you get McKinsey here. You see there's
Is he 37, Buttigieg?
38, yeah. So there you have the Global Fund thing. McKinsey very much involved in that. And that was, the consensus statement was April 2001. This thing came together January 2002. All right, now who graduated from Stanford University May, June 2001, Jason, who's connected to a president of the United States?
Maybe, what's her name's husband?
Chelsea Clinton. So she graduates in
went
June.
to Stanford too?
Yeah, she went in June. You were thinking Susan Rice.
No, I was thinking of Chelsea's husband. What's his name?
Oh, he went there too, Mizvinsky.
Yeah.
So, but she graduates May, June 2001, goes to Oxford for a 2-year program starting in September of 2001.
Did she get kicked out for selling cocaine and raping people? Or was
No. Well, why do you keep...
I'm surprised they would frown on that type of behavior.
No. That's too mean. Anyway, so...
isn't that true? Isn't that true that Bill Clinton was kicked out?
Well, I wasn't going to bring up the father issue.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if you so in January of 2002, this Global Fund comes together. Now, in January of 2001, we've done shows before, and this NPR story will confirm that the questions were being asked later about this fellow who controlled Info USA, who began funneling money towards the Clinton family in January of 2001.
Wasn't this company that was like getting money from people who were like
Alzheimer. These were people. This company, among its many distinguished things that it did, is it created mailing lists. But these are really reprehensible mailing lists. So you get a mailing list of people
who don't know what they're doing
with Alzheimer's. Then you say, "Well, that's a great group to mail to for the Clinton Foundation," because just keep calling them again and again.
They forgot they gave you
exactly.
money. They just keep paying every day.
Yeah, and that's not hypothetical there. So yeah, Vinod Gupta, no relation to Rajat Gupta, head of McKinsey at the time. Created this thing called Mind Spirit LLC in Nevada that was routing money, it was later found, to the Clinton, millions of dollars, to Chelsea, to Bill, to Hillary, at a time when Hillary was a senator. And there still hasn't been, at a time when dopey James Comey and Robert Mueller were supposedly investigating all this, they didn't manage to find any of it. So keep going into the slides there, Jason.
Sorry, there was some porno person posting in the comments that I think I just deleted.
Good, okay. So then you get this, here we get Chelsea Clinton, one of her many turgid offerings that have been published. This is a thesis, this is her PhD thesis. She wrote her master's thesis about it. She wrote another thesis about her PhD is The Global Fund, an Experiment in Global Governance. That's not what I would call, that's a flippant, that's a kind of a title from somebody who doesn't bother to earn money to work. I mean, the Global Fund cost taxpayers around the world close to $100 billion. 75 to 80% of its disbursements are unaccounted for. And this idiot gets a PhD from Oxford with this type of thesis. I think, there's a lot, I will have people, and I myself am going to be reluctantly reading all of her work, but as a guest, this will document the evolution of a disaster, a fund that was, put together under a premise that's highly questionable. It was never regulated properly, and we have somebody get the daughter of a former president getting a PhD thesis and many other plaudits for writing something like this, and book contracts to write the latest book that she's written. About something that I would argue has done a lot more harm than good. Yeah, January 2014. So people who would like to go to sleep quickly can read this. I will try to keep awake and get through it. But I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of telling footnotes and references in here that are going to help undercut or gut the theory that Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative and Clinton Health Access Initiative should ever have been organized. So while the Clinton Foundation and Chelsea Clinton and McKinsey were getting involved illegally, in theory, fighting HIV/AIDS, they were also doing something that was unbelievably illegal, and that is promoting the sale of Ranbaxy drugs. Now, if you hit this is from October of 2003. Okay, in October 27th, 2003,
but this is their press release if it's on Business Wire.
Yeah. Okay. This is a press release which claims that they've entered into this agreement with the Clinton Foundation, the William Jefferson Clinton Foundation, which didn't exist. There was no such thing. It was called the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. There was nothing called the William Jefferson Clinton Foundation on October 27th, 2003, although maybe there was in a crooked bank somewhere in Mauritius or where they may have created such an entity. But
I thought it was on 33rd Street.
Yeah, and it talks here about Ranbaxy has signed an agreement with the foundation to promote the sale of its drugs. Now, its drugs on October 27, 2003 were not authorized for sale by the FDA in the United States. It may have been, in quotes, authorized by the World Health Organization, but this was certainly not a legitimate undertaking for a foundation based in Little Rock that was supposed to focus on doing stuff in a city park at Little Rock, had no authority to have offices in Massachusetts, New York. Bill Clinton had no authority to commit the foundation or sign an agreement like this. He wasn't an officer. He wasn't a trustee. And none of this was disclosed to the IRS in anything I've seen, because the public filings, the filings that you make to the IRS are public. So here we have prima facie evidence of massive fraud right, going as far back as October 27, 2003, when, guess what? Dopey James Comey and Mueller and possibly Rosenstein were all investigating the Clinton Foundation, but evidently they didn't read maybe they couldn't afford the subscription to the Indian newspapers and they missed this. Maybe they were just focused on stuff in DC.
Charles, there's a new form of attack happening right now.
No doubt. Can you fend it off?
I'm trying, but it's affecting our somehow.
All right. Well, sorry to hear that. Can we go back into the slide, or is that also under attack?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Hear me, Charles?
I can hear you perfectly in the next room.
Sound is back.
All right,
I
good.
don't know. It's really interesting. I don't know what's causing that or how they're able to do that.
So if you're going to get involved with a massive fraud, you've got to work with an accounting firm that's really good at missing fraud. So if we turn to this 7th line here, and this is an exhibit in demonstrating that the firm of BKD LLP, obviously, at least the Little Rock office, and anyone who oversaw the Little Rock office, is completely incompetent. Because this is a firm that put its name on this 2004 financial report that is manifestly false. We just go to the next page to refresh people's recollection. It gets the name of the thing wrong. Of course, it's a page after, I'm sorry. Page after that. There, top of the page. We look here at the largest expense item on this page is grants and allocations, $45,331,227. By far and away, the 80% roughly of the revenue, declared revenue of this thing in 2004. And you see in this entry here, it says that all of that was in the form of cash, when we know that that's not true. 36 million was non-cash, 7.2 million was for an endowment, and the difference may have been a cash grant, but it was in part to Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, an entity that didn't exist lawfully in that year. And this firm, BKD LLP, the auditing, the tax people allow somebody to put their name down on this return, just at the same time as the CEO of the Clinton Foundation is certifying in an agreement with the National Archives that they haven't strayed from their original status as a public charity focused on being an archive and research center in Little Rock. Just as he's lying to the National Archives, BKD is lying to the IRS, and they still haven't fixed any of this. And on top of this, the audit, in quotes, that for this 2004 year was also performed by BKD on a basis, they say gleefully in their accompanying letter, that is using accounting techniques that are not allowed in the United States of America. And they haven't changed any of this, and they've been soliciting ever since. So key, if you're going to do the largest charity fraud in history, in league with sitting politicians, Hillary Clinton, a senator back in 2004 hoping to be president, you want to get a firm that's crooked as hell, or at least it has people who are crooked as hell. And that firm then was BKD LLP, which still has not pulled the financial statements that circulate. I get this off the public domain. Been out there ever since. They still haven't pulled their work, and they really need to do that. So if we go to the next, back into the slide.
People have been waiting all afternoon for the appearance of Truman the Tiger, Charles. And there he was.
There he is, okay. So if you're going to do all this, you really need to work with somebody who's trying to get something out of the globalist system. You want to find a country that's relatively small, that has a leader who wants to get a higher stature on the world stage. That country in 2003 was Ireland. And if we hit this 8, this is a summary of the agreement that in theory was struck with Ireland in July of 2003. The supposedly $158 million agreement to pour to pour that kind of amount of money to buy HIV/AIDS medicine for a country that had no roads, where the cities were mineral roads, where the people were not in cities, that didn't have much electricity, that didn't have a healthcare system. And $158 million for one country, Mozambique, was a hell of a lot of money, leaving aside the issue that, of course, in 2003, July 9th, 2003, Bill Clinton had no authority to commit the Clinton Foundation to anything. It wasn't organized for this work. It wasn't authorized for the work. The real name of the entity was not William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. It was the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. They had not registered, made truthful declarations to the government of Ireland concerning their status anywhere in the world, concerning the numerous defects in their state filings for soliciting illegally in Mississippi, for using an unregistered fundraising agent, O'Brien, McConnell, and Pearson. I mean, there are all sorts of problems with this, but yet KHN Morning Briefing, Kaiser Health News, which is a serious operation, supposedly monitoring health, they were bamboozled by this. They said, yeah, the Clinton Foundation, July 9th, 2003, is going to get $158.2 million. That's almost as much as they claimed the Clinton Foundation they were raising to build the complex in Little Rock. It's an absurd amount of money.
I want to thank Mary Lynn for using Super Chat. She's fond of the word turgid, Charles.
All right, good.
And the strangest thing is happening. We've got a litany of pornographic channels coming into the chat, spamming, but yet sometimes directly addressing me by name and talking about Chelsea Clinton and Buell Hubble. So how could a spam attack be so targeted? It's weird.
It's really weird.
I don't understand what's going on there exactly. Sorry, Charles.
That's okay.
Manage all the different stuff.
Yeah, I've got one task and you're doing a million, so my hat's off to you. So if you're going to work,
wearing a hat, so that's really good.
If you hit the 9th link there, or the link in box 9, if you're going to do this as well, you need a crooked accounting firm, or at least people in a crooked accounting firm, crooks in an accounting firm. Then you might want to find a politician who is crooked as hell. And here's this Conor Lenehan, who is under assault for his work at Skolkovo in Russia. We've talked about that before. Prior to that, he was the government official who oversaw the provision of aid from Ireland towards a foundation, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, that had no authority to do any of this international AIDS work. And here he is under pressure. He's thinking about running for the European Parliament or something like that. People are asking him tough questions in 2019. They should have started back in 2003 and 4 and 5 and 6 when he was involved funneling money to the Clinton Foundation to do HIV/AIDS work for which there's no authority. And furthermore, the folks at Fox ought to ask some tough questions of Jim Kennedy, who is centrally involved in raising this money from Ireland illegally. So if we go back into the slides.
Charles, I quickly want to thank Doug for using Super Chat. He advises me to ignore the bots. It's a great idea. The only reason I think they need to be observed is because it's interesting how these attacks come on your show and using sophisticated methods that are really, there was one time they knocked the whole show out, remember?
Well, let's hope they don't do that because we've got a lot to cover still.
Yes.
So if you're also going to do all this with crooked accounting firm and crooked politicians, you want to find a stone cold fool to give you an award for this work. Now, who would possibly give Bill Clinton an award for this work, do you think?
Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, no, he didn't get that, but another Democratic former president who's even less competent than Bill Clinton, James and Rosalind Carter. So if you look at this, is an actual award they decided to give Bill Clinton for perpetrating charity fraud.
Wow.
I mean, it's just...
Jimmy Carter gave Bill Clinton an award?
Here you go.
What's
The
up with Jimmy
2005
Carter?
Jimmy and Rosalind Carter Award for humanitarian contributions to the health of humankind. Now, my understanding is that Carter and Clinton were not close.
Yeah.
And 2005 is interesting because at that time, there really was. They had put an application into the IRS for this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, but they never got authority. He would have known this at the time that he was taking this award. So you get some dumb cluck peanut farmer, and I'm sure there are smart peanut farmers. Carter's not one of them.
He was a nuclear physicist, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as people say, there's a bottom half of every class, and maybe he did manage to get his degree, but this guy was, I mean, Obama makes Jimmy Carter look pretty good, but Carter, I remember I was in college and then business school with this cluck, and I mean, for him to allow, he's got multiple charities, Jimmy Carter does, to give Bill Clinton an award for committing, in essence, for committing charity fraud is rather something.
Didn't you have breakfast with Jimmy Carter one time?
When I was a little kid, we had at my residential college at Yale was called Timothy Dwight, and a rich family, the Chubb family of insurance fame.
Oh, I used to have Chubb Insurance.
Yeah, well, they gave a large fund or something to my residential college to invite aspiring and former world leaders to live with us for 2 to 3 days each. And I did get a phone call one morning, it's a frantic morning. Charles, you got to get down here. Nobody's going to have breakfast with Jimmy Carter. Nobody's interested. Would you sit down with him? And he had a table for like 12 people. There's Jimmy Carter, the organizer, me, and one other person. And I mean, he was pretty dull back in, that's in forget when exactly. It might have been as far back as 76 or 77.
But it looks like he was hanging out. Well, he would have been.
No, it was
president
before.
in
No, 75. That's right, 75.
Yeah. So he was on the campaign trail. Looks like he's got kind of a history of hanging out with the coke snorting rapist. I mean, Bill Clinton. And then, wait, who's this? Mondale.
Mondale, yeah.
That was the vice president or the opponent?
Mondale was both of those. Mondale was,
But for Jimmy Carter, he was vice president?
Carter, Mondale, yeah. He was presidential candidate in '84.
That didn't go well.
And his family, on the other hand, members of his family were very much involved servicing Bill Clinton, Eleanor Mondale.
What?
Yeah, Eleanor Mondale, it's alleged, was one of the White House visiting program.
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
So then if you're going to do all this, what you really need to have to make it all appear legitimate is to have some people who are really good writing English language and slapping brochures together so you can pay them enormous amounts of money. So that's what this thing is here. The final link, this ITAD is, okay, you put Clinton into the search results and you get this report we're going to show you in a second, various reports that really sound fantastic. I mean, they just slap stuff together. The paper looks nice. Must have a great, communications department, maybe some fancy writers. But basically, they miss the essential point that the recipient of the money from DFID lawfully didn't exist, never existed, never had authority to behave in the way it was behaving, never filed any report that was accurate. And yet, here's some cluck, another cluck, hired actually multiple times by multiple governments to go and say, what happened to our money? Okay? So we go to the next page. In terms of this DFID, if you hit the first link up there, no, not that one, at the very top, yeah. This is an academic piece. I don't know if it'll come through here. It would come through in the library. If it doesn't, yeah, here. Beltway Bandits and Poverty Barons. I love this title by Vijay Najaraj, I guess, May 2015. So just at the same time, roughly the same time as this report comes out, here's somebody saying that there's this alliance of Beltway Bandits and Poverty Barons who are basically making a gigantic profit off of this administration of foreign aid. Okay? So I commend this for people to read. So let's go back into the slide quickly, and I'm mindful of your schedule and the time.
What schedule do I have?
You've got another show later.
Oh, it got canceled.
Oh, well, in that case, 5 hours, man. 5 hours, baby. No. So here are just 8 examples of the Clinton Foundation being tied to DFID directly or go to the back. Yeah. So we have DFID financing the HIV/AIDS efforts in May of 2005, when definitely the Clinton Foundation was not authorized to do that. We have their evaluation of DFID support for Mozambique. That's with Ireland, doing work there in the Clinton Foundation. This report about Indonesia mentions that DFID decided to pull out of Indonesia. So who rushed back in? Alexander Downer, and Australia sent money in.
Where is that guy now?
I don't know. And then here's testimony about DFID saying all the good work they did in India with the Clinton Foundation at a time when the Clinton Foundation and Bill Clinton and others are putting applications into our IRS claiming that they had never done any work prior to 2009 and fighting HIV/AIDS. Then we have this press release describing them as a fantastic longtime partner. We have the Daily Mail saying the UK sent more than 50 million pounds toward these Clinton charities. We have this absurd announcement here on the 25th of September 2015, where DFID, Unilever, and Clinton Justra Enterprise Partnership say they're going to set up a new partnership to help 100 million people. That's a lot of people.
Unilever, the soap company?
Yeah. They're also in water and other things. So here then is, at the very bottom, is this Freedom of Information request, which is interesting. This was put in May of 2017. Hillary has lost. 9 May 2017 is right.
This is a British Freedom of Information.
Right, and 9 May 2017 is what happened right after then, 4 days later.
9th of May 2017? I don't know.
Peter Smith died.
Oh.
You also have Mueller had just been appointed. I mean, Comey was out, Mueller was appointed. Here's the request, okay? And if we go down this slowly, you'll see, if you could pull, you'll see, here's the answer, okay? Thank you. Please note you have to publish your response. Keep going. We'll get the response, and let's see if it, for some reason, here we go. Here's the response.
Oh, let's download it.
Okay.
It's a PDF, or what is it?
Yeah, you'll see. It'll be interesting. When I did it, you got an interesting response.
It didn't do anything.
Right.
Let's look at it here. This is called What Do They Know?
Yeah.
Whoops.
For some reason, the response is not, you can't get it. Oh, here it is. How'd you do that?
That's the downloaded version.
All right. Well, in the other way, you couldn't get it anymore. But if you go down this page, it says, here's the amount paid year by year, okay?
So this is good.
This is good, except that it's not. All this money, in theory, went to Clinton Health Access Initiative year by year by year. Okay, this is a lot of money. 12 million pounds, 20 million pounds in 2014. Hillary has a shot at being president of the United States in 2014. Hasn't turned over all of her emails yet. Another 20, basically. It's a lot of money. Okay, and as a guest, they had made payments to affiliates of the Clinton Foundation prior. This is good evidence. Now let's go back in.
People want us to continue for 5 hours to counter-program the Oscars, Joe.
Oh, that's
I
true.
might pass out.
Yeah. So we go to the next page. The Oscars, what are they? I thought that's the scammies.
That's a good idea, actually, we did an Ortels show. It's hard to believe that was a year ago.
It was in March. So, so here's an ITAD report, excerpts from it. We're not going to read all these pages, but basically this is a report issued April 2016. It says that this DFID has commissioned this firm to look at 35 million pounds that went to something called Market Shaping for Access to Safe, Effective, and Affordable Health Commodities. 35 million pounds for a study on that. It's like word torrent crap.
Yeah, what's a health commodity?
I don't know, but it's just word torrents. And you have the confirmation, the grant ran from 2012 to 2015. This report is issued April 2016. May 7th, 2016 is when I was first in Zero Hedge. If you hit this here, just to bring it up. So just as these boneheads at ETAD are issuing a report saying, oh yeah, it's fantastic what we've done here, I come out and say, wait a minute, this is a massive fraud. And interestingly, in the past it had a lot of shares. I don't believe this thing had 0 shares.
Well, it seems like there's been some heat on Zero Hedge lately. They got kicked off of Twitter.
Yeah, well, they need to get back on Twitter. But anyway, so right at the same time that I'm saying there's a massive fraud, specifically talking about Clinton Health Access Initiative, ITAD, this venerable firm in, I don't know where they are exactly in Europe, but somewhere in what remains of Europe, issues this incredibly lengthy piece of crap report that misses the obvious frauds. And we go to the next page. Let's talk a little bit about Chai in this period 2013 to 15. Okay? In total, you look at surface level and you say, well, this isn't bad. It takes in 242 million of grants. That would probably be government grants. And then contributions from either the general public or foundations, another 185. So in 3 years, it got 427 million bucks. That's a hell of a lot of money. And it had expenses of 397 million. Each of these 3 years, 13, 14, and 15, were, in quotes, audited by a firm called MHM. Put that in here. And MHM, I've got a typo, that should just be 2014, but MHM missed kind of like a fundamental point. Clinton Health Access Initiative didn't lawfully exist anywhere on earth.
Isn't that the company with like, what's her name working for them? With the funny name? Chinese woman who married an American guy and now her name rhymes?
That's I think you think of Clinton Climate Initiative.
What's the person's name?
Ruby Shang?
No. There was like somebody, I can't remember.
We'll come to this. But this is an entity that was, the Clinton Health Access Initiative was illegally incorporated on the 29th of September, 2009. Now let's think about that moment in time. I don't know where you were back then. I know where I was.
2009?
Yeah.
LA.
Too much for the man. So September 29th, 2009, I believe Barack Obama had, around then, the world learned that he was the Nobel Peace Prize for having done nothing.
For having not yet bombed everyone.
Right, exactly. And so he's set to get that gigantic award. Hillary and the team are using the toilet bowl server system. Nobody knows, how many different fictitious names and alias emails were being used, or indeed where all the emails may have been. Imagine the traffic that must have been going back and forth. Obama's gotten this Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing. And now he's going to go to Oslo to collect it in whenever that was, November, December time frame.
At that museum that we went to? I
think so. And you're sitting there, and somebody inside the Obama administration has realized, holy shit, this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative doesn't exist. We got to do something about this. And
Let's create our own fake organization.
So instead, this is a nuance for people who haven't heard this before. What these people did, imagine this with a company that, let's say, you owned 100% of, right? How happy would you be if the CEO of your company, you own it 100%, let's say it has 100 million of assets in it, and your paid CEO says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new company over here. I'm just going to take the 100 million out of your company and put it into my company, and then have that company be controlled by Bill Clinton and Ira Magaziner, and not tell anybody that I'm doing that.
I mean, it's a huge theft, obviously.
That's what they did.
Wow.
Bruce Lindsay, the CEO, incorporated a new entity that had no shareholders, and it was not lawfully, there were not bylaws, so it wasn't organized, and transferred the activities of something that had been inside the Clinton Foundation into this Clinton Health Access Initiative, in theory with effect from January 1st, 2010, but in practice there was a tremendous amount, maybe hundreds of millions of assets and commitments that were owed to the old company that have disappeared. There's never been an accounting anywhere for how the money that had been inside the Clinton Foundation disappeared inside Boston, inside Little Rock, inside New York, and inside the United States and around the world, because the predecessor operation was vast. by far and away the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation. No explanation for that. Think of the emails that must have been going back and forth from purported whistleblowers and other people saying, wait a minute, what the fuck are you guys doing here? I mean, we gotta get this baked off. People must have been complaining at the Gates Foundation, various governments that have given money. Now you're going to say that, you know, there was no predecessor operation and government of Norway had given a lot of money. Other companies, countries and foundations have given a lot of money to a fraud. So clearly MHM did no work on this. Clearly DFID did even less due diligence, and ITAD was just probably having some combination of bong hits and whiskey to put together their report. But at surface level, you look at it and say, well, it's been audited. There's a firm, MHM, there's paperwork, there's numbers. Let's look a little bit more closely at the numbers on the next page.
Who's the principal at that MHN accounting firm?
I don't know the name. It's Meyer, Hoffman, and something or other, McCann. But if we look at this, as we've explained in the past, the number that really matters in a charity is what are called direct program expenditures. That's when you say you're going to be, what is it, the thing that you did, the Save the Cheater initiative? If you're going to actually try to save cheaters, right?
Yeah.
You look and you say it so well. How do you say it?
What?
Bill Clinton-esque?
Save the cheaters.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to have a Save the Cheaters Foundation, you keep track of the money you spend on saving cheaters, on direct program expenditures. Everything else is overhead, right? And so when you look at these categories, and mind you, these numbers are lifted out of the MHM work product, okay? Nobody at MHM thought to say, now wait a minute, we're spending 100%, if our baseline is $66 million, we're spending 273% of program expenditures on travel. On salaries and benefits. 54% on travel. 42% on professional, on and on and on. And then you see a pattern. Year in and year out, roughly 5 times the base level expenditures, the program expenditures, goes to other allocated expenses. So in other words, you come up with a project and you say, okay, we're going to need to spend $66 million directly, but we've got a whole bunch of stuff that we're either going to steal by creating, invoices that overstate the cost, or we're going to pay off for $180 million a bunch of people who shouldn't be getting $180 million to do anything. You load up the direct expenditures with almost exactly 5 times their cost gets sprinkled across these various buckets. Anybody who knows anything about business or accounting would look at this and say, massive fraud.
Well, am I seeing correctly? It says 500%?
Right. In other words, the sum total of these allocated expenses were almost exactly 5 times the expenses of really doing the charity. So you have these pinheads writing studies that nobody's going to check that sound fantastic. I mean, ITAD actually in this embarrassing report praises the cooperative efforts of the Chai people. Of course they're going to cooperate with you. They want you to write a report exonerating them for committing charity fraud. What more do you expect from the fraudster? You've written a report saying that this is a fantastic deal when it's a fraud. And this, mind you, these are the numbers at the consolidated level for Chai. There has never been a roll-up, country by country, currency by currency, real expenditure by real expenditure. We don't know that these direct program expenditures are all direct. What that means is, like, if I go to you, Jason, I'm working for you, and remember, I'm out of the working for anybody business, but let's say I'm working for you because you pay me a lot of money, and you send me to Whole Foods to buy you a kombucha, and you say, I can just take the company credit card and buy the kombucha, and I come back and I give you 1 kombucha, and you say, well, how much did that cost? And I say, well, it was only $1,000. And you're like, what? Well, I mean, I don't think in amounts less than $1,000, so of course I gave the man $1,000. You would not probably pay my expense report, let alone allow me to continue working here. This is just foolishness. It's just, on the face of it, nobody inside MHM, nobody inside the Clinton Foundation, no lawyer, no person who takes life seriously has spent 1 second considering these numbers. Because if you did, you would look at this and you say, okay, I get it. It's a slush fund. It's a lot cheaper to spend whatever this math is, $400 million buys you the Hillary Clinton administration. Okay, I get it. That's cheaper than MBS's new yacht or his Rembrandt or what. For $400 million, I look the other way and I get to direct the $6.5 trillion annual spending of the U.S. government. I get to, when I need, destroyers and aircraft carriers to come to my country, or I need a big flyover at this event or whatever, I got the Clintons for $400 million. Let's go to the next page. Okay, so then let's think about, people would say, well, Charles, you're being too hard. Maybe they were trying, they had the right to do this. Nobody else was going to do it. Evil George Bush wasn't going to do it. These are excerpts from various legal documents that were sworn out under penalties of perjury. In the first case by Bruce Lindsay, he signs a form saying that this new entity they formed, Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., incorporated on the 24th of March, 2004 at 10:13 in the morning. Now, presumably, they didn't get up at 5 in the morning and draft this long document. The work had been going on. We don't yet know how far back work had been going on trying to create this fraud. But they file a document with the Secretary of State saying this new entity, controlled by the Clinton Foundation without authority to do so, this is as they're negotiating with the National Archives, claiming that all they were doing is work in Little Rock in separate legal documents. This new thing is going to be doing medical care and treatment to people with HIV and AIDS, educating them, and, quote, improving health delivery systems for HIV/AIDS patients, quote, in resource-poor areas of the world. Now, that's the kind of definition that, remember, you're dealing with somebody who would quibble with you about the meaning of the word is. You could make the argument that resource-poor areas of the world is all but Beverly Hills, Greenwich, Park Avenue. The world's a pretty big place. 70% of the world is ocean.
Yeah.
On the stuff that's land, this basically gives you license to do anything you want, in theory, anywhere in the world, if you're a quibbler about the meaning of the word is. Okay? This entity, there's never been any evidence that this entity validly obtained tax exemption from the IRS. But this is the first foray, remember, after the Ranbaxy announcement in October of 2003, when they were supposedly doing works promoting the sale of Ranbaxy drugs the previous year. They don't get around to setting up a legal entity until the next year. It never gets authority, so what do we do? We craft a fake merger in Little Rock. We don't have the text in here, but on the 31st of December, 2005, after the IRS, my theory, turned them down to be a charity, they say, okay, we'll just merge it back into the parent and pretend that we could do it anyway. Then they create Unitate in 2006, 19th September 2006, and some bright bulbs at Unitate say, wait a minute, this is my working suspicion, you don't have any authority to do any of this work, and we've already given you tens of millions of dollars, so we're in trouble, you got to paper this over. So they paper it over by creating William J. Clinton Foundation in the UK on the 10th of July 2007, and they expand the idea of what this Clinton Foundation in the UK can do way beyond the authority of the US operation to do work outside Little Rock. And they use language that makes no sense. You're going to promote purposes that are charitable under English law, including but not limited. Including but not limited. So an expansive definition of what you can do beyond what's in your US charter, which is not allowed under US law. US tax-exempt entities have to limit what they're going to do to specific purposes. You cannot give somebody a carte blanche in a federally tax-exempt foundation to do whatever they want. But notice here, up here you're talking the first thing about HIV/AIDS. In the second thing, now you're talking about only helping people with AIDS. And there's a big difference between being HIV infected, HIV positive, and having full-blown AIDS. You tell me that you can cure full-blown AIDS, that's a major accomplishment. You tell me that you can prolong the life of somebody, the onset of full-blown AIDS, that you can arrest the spread of HIV or progression into full-blown AIDS, that's old news in 2007. I mean, that was something that people knew how to do and progressively have known more and more how to do. But so this is changing the definition of what you theory could do by way of a UK entity for which Bruce Lindsay and Andrew Kessel had no legitimate authority to set up, though they did. Interestingly, they define this US foundation in the articles as something that was, whose name was changed to William J. Clinton Foundation on the 5th of October 2004. Now that never happened. We will show you in a second, they never changed the name of the original entity, the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, never changed its name to William J. Clinton Foundation on 5 October 2004. But Kessel and Lindsay lied under oath to authorities in the UK. And these are the same authorities that said, you know what, you guys are great at lying and fraud. Why don't we have our government give you tens of millions of pounds to spread around the world that nobody will really check to see what happened, so that we can all steal money together from the UK taxpayer. So then, when all this didn't work so well, they said, let's create this Clinton Health Access Initiative, Inc. on the 29th of September. And now, instead of just doing the original work of the Clinton Foundation, you're doing God's work. In this charity, you say that you have the right to do, that you're engaged in religious activities. The Clinton Foundation has no authority. You have a First Amendment right as an individual to get involved with religion, but not, you know, a protected right to have freedom of religion. But charities don't have the right to magically go from being archives for presidential records and research centers into creating religions. On the face of it, this is nonsense, this adjustment. And now you're not just doing HIV and AIDS stuff or purely AIDS stuff, you're doing malaria, tuberculosis, and other economic and social development activities that help alleviate poverty and disease in resource-poor settings. Now, one way to define for-profit activity is that for-profit activity helps you alleviate poverty, right? This is a nonsense word torrent brought to you probably by people from McKinsey or people who are familiar with how McKinsey works. It is a workover, a rushover that did not work, but it was essential to get some sort of architecture in place, is my working theory, prior to Barack Obama landing in Oslo in December 2009 to collect his Peace Prize. You it wouldn't suit the various governments who'd already given this Clinton Foundation, starting in 2002, a lot of money to fight HIV/AIDS, to have absolutely no defense that you were basically looking the other way as your taxpayers in Norway and France and Chile and Brazil via Unitate, many other countries, your taxpayers are struggling to make ends meet, and a portion of the monies that they clip away from their paychecks are being sent into this slush fund that then goes to feather the nests in the political campaigns of a notoriously, it is alleged, corrupt family, the Clintons. So this is not a good fact pattern here. Then we get into the more facts, fun facts. This is a synthesis of just one piece of the analysis here. I could, demolish the argument that the Clinton Foundation has articles of incorporation that are valid by taking you into a lot more complexity than this. Here we're just going to focus on the evolution of the name. Okay? It's very important that on the 23rd of October 1997 at 11:22 in the morning, the people who came together to incorporate this entity were not the trustees. It was lawyers. These lawyers had a conflict of interest. Their law firm was owed by numerous press accounts millions of dollars by Bill Clinton. The heat was rising on Clinton over the Lewinsky matter and on the Paula Jones lawsuit and other matters. And this law firm, the working theory is, had to worry about whether they'd ever get paid. One way to get paid is to set up this presidential foundation that would then give the Clinton family the license to go solicit money, in theory, for a foundation. But it wasn't the trustees who adopted these articles of incorporation on the 23rd of October 1997. And importantly, they did not make a drafting error here. In the first article, you have a preamble explaining what they're doing. In the first article, they say the name of the lowercase corporation, which is here under referred to as the corporation, uppercase, is the, notice the word the is important, William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. Now, you could say, Charles, you're fucking old fart. You just care about these details. But when you are sloppy about the name of your corporation and you allow people around you to be really sloppy, multiple bank accounts can get opened in names that sound like it's the Clinton Foundation but aren't really. And then that's the way you commit fraud. You have money sent. You make the check out to William J. Clinton, presidential.
Sometimes they let you deposit a check for whatever.
Depends, not necessarily for a foundation.
I mean, they're not supposed to at all, but sometimes
right, people bend the rules, especially for a president.
Or the bank doesn't notice or whatever.
Or it's a hypothetical. It's a bank that's
Close enough.
under pressure. Maybe it made a mistake and doesn't want to get regulated by
somebody who works there.
Exactly. So the real name of it is referred to as corporation, and in each of these other articles that are mentioned here, on October 23rd, 1997, there are references to uppercase corporation, which is not a trivial drafting error. If you change this and you start referring to something as an uppercase corporation that's not defined, your document's meaningless, right? So by the 23rd of December, 1997, maybe bylaws were adopted by trustees. All we have so far are evidence that we don't know who signed it, that bylaws were adopted, but we don't know yet by whom. Okay? The first time that the bylaws were amended was on the 25th of April, 2005. Okay? And when they're amended, they state on that date that they're the amended bylaws of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. This, again, is not nitpicking what I'm about to take you through. On the 25th of April, 2005, supposedly, whereas this one has article in caps, Roman numeral 1, with a caption, a descriptor for what the article is going to be. This one simply says, in a different format, article, just not caps, the name, they don't say of the corporation, they say the name of the organization. And they don't say that the name of the organization on that date is the William J. Clinton Foundation. They say it shall be. Now, the IRS regulations and the reporting forms require, and state reporting forms require you to not simply submit a form that just changes one article, but to submit what's called a conformed copy, where you take the change that you've made and you give a whole new document that shows the impact of that change. To change Article 1 in this way would put it out of sync with the balance of the document, but there is no reference to organization in the original document. So you've now created, by this change, whoever did this, and as a guess, it's probably that idiot Andrew Kessel, who doesn't have any common sense and doesn't know anything about accounting, which is why he's the chief financial officer still from April Fool's Day 2004 to the present. Probably somebody like him thought they could be really clever and we'll just make this change and nobody will check and it doesn't matter. The effect of this change is, I would argue, to destroy the legal foundation of the entity. Because now it doesn't have functioning articles. Right? The other provisions that are mentioned here, don't apply. They apply to an uppercase corporation, not to something called an organization. So they file this change on the 28th of April. Notice in England, they say, we amended the name of the corporation on October 5th, 2004. Do you see an entry in here, Jason, for October 5th, 2004?
No.
That's because there wouldn't be one. They never did that. They did adopt a fictitious name, or tried to, in Arkansas on October 5th, 2004, but that only changes what you can say your name is inside Arkansas. It has nothing to do with England, nothing to do with New York, nothing. And so this is a really crafty, sleazy effort. These are people intentionally trying to deceive regulators around the world. So that's not good enough for them. They change the name once. Then they say, well, wait a minute, why don't we change the name again? So on the 27th of August, 2007, again, they file, this time it's not underlined, it's Article 1, and they say the name of the corporation is William J. Clinton Foundation on this date, but they don't file the amendment with the Secretary of State until the 8th of July, 2008. And on my reading of Arkansas law, I am not a lawyer, is that you cannot wait 11 months or 10 months to make this filing in Arkansas the way they did. So I don't think this is a legitimate change. And then by the 8th of April 2013, instead of saying Article 1 name, instead of lowercase, now they change it and they say first. This is the first entry, which is not consistent with the balance of the document. And they say the name of the lowercase corporation, again, shall be Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, but it's not a defined term. So again, the articles are completely invalid. They're nonsense. And this from a team. Let's think about the team we have here. Hillary Clinton, one of the smartest lawyers in the world by her own friend's statement. Bill Clinton, former Attorney General.
Who made that statement?
Multiple, people who wanted to get on the right side of the Queen of Mean when she became president.
Wait a minute. We should have eliminated the. We should eliminate the kangaroo. The kangaroo court is over.
That's true. Well, no, they're talking about a second one. We have to get a second one.
What?
No, they're talking about trying to ramp it up for some other reason.
Really?
Anyway, we're almost done.
Sorry.
It's okay. So if we go to the final page, here's an important thing, for people like Angel Urena, the queen, the banana queen.
Yeah.
The Clinton Foundation and this CHI, this Clinton Health Access Initiative, are meant to be a specific type of public charity. Now, a public charity, it's actually this long jargon here, 170B1A6. It's a certain type of public charity. Now, a public charity has to be supported generally by the public. Examples of what this was intended to be: a museum of history, a library, something that does direct service to the U.S. general public. Okay, a public charity is unlike the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A public charity is not it is a subset of a private foundation. Private foundations like the Gates Foundation can be controlled by their donors. That's something you can do if you're careful about it. You got to make sure that the foundation actually engages in tax-exempt activity and doesn't overpay family members and doesn't do many other things. But a public charity...
You're saying controlled by the donors or the founders?
Well, in the Gates family, it's, the Gates family gives the bulk of the money. So I'm saying, if you had the Goodman Foundation, I had the Ortel Foundation, let's say, I could give an amount of money to a foundation that bore my name, and I could say, you know what, since it's our family money going into it, I want my kids and my nephews and my brothers to be on the board, and we're going to make sure that the money that we give to this foundation actually does. You could do all that.
So you're the donors and the controllers.
You can do that, but you have to be very careful. You can't do that and say, all right, what I'm going to do is I've got a bunch of, I don't have this and my brothers do not have it either, a bunch of ne'er-do-well next generation people can never hold a decent job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my only daughter the vice chairman and give her a chief of staff and a portion of expensive office space and fly her around in private planes, even though this person has never done a lick of work. And has no experience in charities, I'm going to elevate her over all the other paid staff. That you cannot do in a public charity.
Right.
Okay. And in red here it says, on the control side, the IRS expects charity boards to have a majority of members who are unrelated by blood, marriage, and outside business ownership. So you set up on April 8th, 9th, 2013, you change the name of something poorly, because you haven't done it correctly, from a presidential foundation that's supposed to be a library in Little Rock to something called the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. And then you wait till the dead of night in November 2nd, 2013 to amend the bylaws that you don't share with state and foreign regulators to say that the only people who can control the Clinton Foundation are Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. Between meetings of the board of directors, and their actions between meetings of the board of directors are never subject to review by the board. I mean, it's bright line, not a public charity. And in this time frame, while the dimwits at ITAD and these other consulting firms are evaluating all the CHI programs, at this moment in time, in 13 and 14 and 15, when the Clinton Foundation or the Clinton family are in theory illegally controlling the main public charity is illegally controls this chai, which is also supposed to be a public charity. So, you look at this, again, I'm not a lawyer, but from a financial standpoint, a number standpoint, from a word and legal standpoint, this thing is as far away from being a foundation, as the group that gathers on the corner of 23 and 7th Avenue is to being at the top of the Forbes 400 list. I mean, it's just...
Those guys outside the pizza place. That's all designer furniture.
Exactly. They're out there, what do they call it? Silicon Alley, right there.
No, that's Broadway.
That's the investment committee of the Silicon Alley, right there, right next to the hot dog stand. I mean, this is as far away from being a legitimate thing as you can be. And so, this is now, we're closing, this is our 207th podcast. I only have it in me to do another 27,000 of these.
Well, people want us to go for 5 hours today to sort of dance over the Oscars. Is that it for the slides, Charles?
Well, yeah, and I just would implore the powers that be. There's been a lot of talk of U.S. attorneys. There's scuttlebutt that maybe people are going to get arrested this week. I would keep eyes on the Moynihan-Doyle matter. I would that we flag in that American Thinker article picked up by Lucian.
Do we believe this? I don't know. Scuttlebutt.
It's got 772 comments already, and 1.4 thousand shares. I think the way I understand this process to work is you find out that you're a target of a criminal investigation when you get a letter or some communication saying you're a target in so many words. And that's when you make the decision, do I hire counsel or not? And so this has certainly gone on long enough. If we go and look at the history of the Clinton Foundation investigation, the first one back in 2001, immediately, it was open on February 15, 2001, but there were conferences 2 days before then, starting the 13th of February 2001, according to the file, and right away grand juries were opened. Okay, and then of course, they made a decision to spend 4 years pretending there was an investigation, then to drop it. So there's a story there, and we should get it. But in this case, Durham's been on the case for, when did he get? He started in 19, didn't he?
Yeah, 2019 for sure.
So he's been on the case for certainly, well over half a year at this point, and he's got a reputation for being a tough prosecutor. So as a guess, grand juries have been convened. There's been a lot of talk and criminal referrals out of the Horowitz report against McCabe and others. So as a guess, we're in a place where people are, I hope, close to being indicted. That's into the origins of the Russia probe. Then the question becomes, when you pull on those strings, how many other strands start unraveling? And given that the first Horowitz report categorically states that multiple FBI investigations were opened in January of 2016 into the Clinton Foundation, the obvious place to look is, okay, why did you open those investigations? How far did you take them? What interplay might there have been on these investigations with the email investigation? Who was the team? Lord help us if it's Strzok and Page on that one as well. Who was on the Clinton Foundation investigation? Who was on the email investigation? Who subsequently became involved on the Get Trump investigation, Operation Crossfire Hurricane? These are all things that by now Durham and his team should know a lot about. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to see some kick-ass action here.
I remain hopeful as well. We've got Porgy questioning if Durham even exists. Very few pictures of him. I think
he exists for sure.
I think he exists. So interesting things going on during this show to be examined. People don't want me talking about trolls and bots, but there's something unique about these because I've set something up that prevented the previous kind, which were just coming in almost faster than I could block them. But it seems like there's something manual about these new ones because they were addressing me personally, talking about what we were talking about. And as I was blocking them, they weren't coming back in as quickly. So I'm not trying to help them do what they're doing, but it's important that the social engineers that attempt to destroy Crowdsource the Truth know that we're actively trying to thwart them. The best way that audience members can help us do that is to become a sponsor of the show. If you're watching every week, you should be a sponsor, because the show can't continue without your support. If you go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, for as little as $2 a month, you're going to enjoy a huge library of sponsor-exclusive content. It's growing every day, so you're really getting much more out of Crowdsource the Truth if you become a sponsor and go there. And I want to thank everybody who's already a sponsor. I want to thank you, Charles, for a great show. People can go enjoy the Oscars or turn off the TV or do whatever you want. See, now there's no sound problem. I don't understand. There's something very strange going on, Charles. No direct evidence of outside interference, but so much circumstantial evidence.
All right. Well, good. Thank you very much, Jason. I hope you enjoy the Oscars as well.
I'm not going to watch that. And thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great night.